The deep space monitoring station hung in the darkness between stars like a metal flower. Its many arms reached out in all directions, listening to the radio waves that traveled across the galaxy. Inside the station, analyst Kethvar sat at his workstation, his four eyes focused on the screens in front of him. Kethvar belonged to the Zephyrian race. His people had been exploring space for over 3,000 years. They were part of something called the Collective, 12 different alien races working together to keep peace in the galaxy. The Collective was powerful and smart. They had the best technology, the strongest ships, and the wisest leaders. Today was different. The listening machines had picked up something new. Radio signals were coming from a small yellow star in a quiet part of the galaxy. The signals were strange and chaotic. They came from the third planet of that star system. Kethvar played the recordings. First came music, loud, angry sounds with screaming voices. Then news reports about wars happening all over the planet. Then entertainment shows full of violence and fighting. The signals painted a picture of a world in constant trouble. These creatures call themselves humans, Kethvar said to his assistant, Yelmora. They seem to be destroying their own planet. Yelmora looked at the data. She was from a different race called the Helix people. Her snake-like body coiled around her chair as she studied the information. Look at this, she said, pointing at the screen. They fight wars constantly. Sometimes the whole planet is involved in fighting. Kethvar nodded. And see here, they are poisoning their own air and water. They cut down their forests. They kill other species for fun. What kind of race does this? More data came in over the following days. The humans had thousands of different languages. They could not agree on simple things like how to measure distance or time. They had hundreds of different religions, and they often fought wars because of these beliefs. This is very strange, Kethvar told Yelmora. Most species become peaceful before they develop space travel. These humans seem to become more violent as they advance. The humans had sent a few simple machines to their moon and nearby planets, but their technology was basic. Their rockets used chemical fuel, something the Collective had stopped using thousands of years ago. Their computers were slow and simple. Their weapons were crude but deadly. They have something called nuclear weapons, Yelmora said. They have enough of these weapons to destroy their planet many times over. Why would anyone build so many? Kethvar studied the data about human society. They were divided into almost 200 separate groups called countries. These countries fought each other regularly. Even within countries, humans fought each other. They had crime, poverty, and disease everywhere. Look at their cities, Kethvar said, full of pollution and violence. They build homes for millions of people, but many humans have no home at all. They grow enough food for everyone, but millions are hungry. They are not logical. The more they learned, the more confused the aliens became. Humans seemed to make every mistake possible. They wasted resources. They fought unnecessary wars. They damaged their environment. They could not work together even when facing planet-wide problems. I think they are dying out, Yelmora said. This behavior cannot last much longer. Kethvar agreed. Most species either learn to cooperate or they destroy themselves. The humans seem to be choosing destruction. A week later, Kethvar was called to present his findings to the High Council. This was a great honor. The High Council included the wisest leaders from all 12 collective races. They met in a huge chamber at the center of the galaxy's most important space station. Kethvar walked into the council chamber. The room was enormous, with seats for hundreds of beings. Each race sat in their own section. The Zephyrians sat in tall chairs that fit their long legs. The Helix people coiled on warm platforms. The silicon mines floated in energy fields. All the races were different, but they had learned to work together in peace. Tell us about these humans, said Council Leader Mordain. He was from the eldest race, the Eternal Ones. His people had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. Kethvar activated his presentation. Images of Earth appeared on the giant screens around the chamber. The humans live on a planet they call Earth, he began. We have been monitoring their radio signals for several months. He showed them recordings of human wars. Armies of humans fighting with guns and bombs. Cities burning. People running in fear. They fight constantly, Kethvar explained. In the past 100 years, they have had 2 global wars involving most of their planet. The council members made sounds of disapproval. The idea of global war was horrible to them. The collective had not seen such violence in thousands of years. They also damaged their environment. Kethvar continued. He showed pictures of polluted rivers, smoggy cities, and destroyed forests. They seem unable to take care of their own planet. More disturbing images followed. Humans fighting over resources. Humans killing animals for sport. Humans building weapons designed to kill as many people as possible. Their society is completely unstable, Kethvar said. They cannot agree on basic principles. They waste energy on conflicts instead of working together. They have the technology to solve many problems, but they use it to create new problems instead. Council leader Mordain leaned forward. What is your assessment? Do these humans pose any threat to galactic civilization? Kethvar had prepared for this question. No threat at all, Council leader. The humans will likely destroy themselves within the next 50 to 100 Earth years. Their current path is unsustainable. They are too violent and chaotic to survive as a space-traveling species. Other council members asked questions. They were curious about human technology, social structure, and biology, but none of them seemed worried about humanity as a threat. They remind me of the Vorthon species, said Councillor Kex Thul from the Crystal Empire. The Vorthons also fought constant wars. They destroyed themselves 3,000 years ago. Or the Metal Eaters of the 7th Sector, added another councillor. They consumed all resources on their planet and died out. The council quickly reached a decision. Humanity would be classified as a species of no concern. This meant the collective would not interfere with human development, but they also would not consider humans important enough to contact or monitor closely. File the report, Council Leader Mordain said. These humans are following a familiar pattern. They will either learn to cooperate soon, or they will eliminate themselves. Either way, they pose no threat to galactic stability. Kethvar felt satisfied with his work. The analysis was clear and logical. The humans showed all the signs of a dying civilization. Their violence, wastefulness, and chaos made long-term survival impossible. As he left the council chamber, Kethvar thought about the strange species on the 3rd planet of that small yellow star. The humans seemed so promising in some ways. They were creative and energetic. They had developed interesting technology despite their problems. But they're violent. Nature would be their downfall. Another species that could not overcome its primitive instincts, Kethvar said to himself. Such a waste. The collective filed humanity under extinct or soon-to-be-extinct species and moved on to more important matters. They had a galaxy to govern and real threats to worry about. The chaotic humans of Earth were not worth their time. None of them realized they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 200 years had passed since the collective dismissed humanity as a dying species. The galaxy continued its peaceful existence under collective rule. Trade flowed between star systems, conflicts were resolved through diplomacy, and new technologies improved life for billions of beings. Far from the collective's attention, something remarkable was happening in the Outer Rim territories. Humanity had not destroyed itself as predicted. Instead, they had quietly begun spreading across the stars. The first human colony ship, called New Hope, had launched from Earth orbit in 2157. It was a massive vessel carrying 50,000 people in suspended sleep. The journey to Kepler 442b would take 47 years at slower than light speeds. While they traveled, the humans had plenty of time to think and plan. Captain Maria Santos woke up from her long sleep as the ship approached its destination. She looked out the window at the planet that would be humanity's first new home. Kepler 442b was larger than Earth, with stronger gravity and a thinner atmosphere. Most species would have looked for an easier world to settle, but humans had spent centuries surviving in difficult places on Earth. "Wake the others," Captain Santos told her crew. "We have work to do." The planet was rich in metals and minerals, but it was not friendly to life. The gravity was 2.5 times stronger than Earth's. The air was too thin to breathe without help. Massive storms swept across the surface regularly. Most alien species would have declared the planet uninhabitable. The humans saw it differently. They had grown up on a world with hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and ice ages. A little strong gravity and thin air did not scare them. "We'll adapt," said Chief Engineer David Park. "We always do." The colonists built their first settlement inside a large crater that gave them protection from the worst storms. They used their mining equipment to dig deep into the rock, creating underground cities that stayed warm and safe. When the surface storms came, the humans simply went deeper. The mining operation was incredibly successful. Kepler 442b contained rare metals that were valuable throughout human space. But getting those metals required working in conditions that would kill most other species. The humans worked in teams, using modified equipment designed to handle the planet's harsh environment. One day, disaster struck. The main mining tunnel, which stretched 15 kilometers underground, suffered a massive collapse. Tons of rock fell, trapping 300 miners in the deepest sections. The surface crew could hear radio signals from the trapped miners, but the signals were getting weaker. "The oxygen recyclers are damaged," reported Chief Miner Hassan al-Rashid from deep underground. "We have maybe 72 hours of breathable air left." On most worlds, this would have been the end. The logical response would be to evacuate the surface and write off the trapped miners as a tragic loss. The rescue operation would be too dangerous and expensive. The humans did not think that way. "We're not leaving them," Captain Santos declared. "Everyone not essential to life support is now part of the rescue operation." What followed was 3 days of the most intense effort the colony had ever seen. Engineers worked without sleep, designing new digging machines from spare parts. Miners volunteered for dangerous jobs clearing unstable tunnels. Medical teams prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. The humans used every trick they had learned on Earth. They pumped high-pressure air through tiny gaps in the collapsed rock. They used sound equipment to locate exactly where the trapped miners were. They even sent down their smallest robot to deliver food and medicine through spaces too narrow for humans. Dr. Sarah Kim worked for 60 straight hours treating injured rescue workers. "This is impossible," she said to her assistant. "We don't have the right equipment for this kind of operation." "Then we'll make the right equipment," replied Engineer Park. He was covered in dirt and had not slept in 2 days, but his eyes were bright with determination. The humans turned their entire mining operation into a rescue mission. They used industrial cutters to slice through solid rock. They reinforced unstable tunnels with pieces of their own buildings. They even cannibalized parts from their spaceship to build better digging equipment. Unknown to the humans, they were being watched. A collective scout ship, the Silent Observer, had been passing through the system when their sensors detected the unusual activity on Kepler 442b. The ship's commander, Scout Captain Veltari, was curious about what she was seeing. "There are definitely beings on that planet," she told her crew, "but the energy readings are strange. They're using very primitive technology, but they're working at incredible intensity." Veltari was from the Flowing People, a race that lived in the deep oceans of their homeworld. Her people were known for their careful, methodical approach to problems. They believed in taking time to find the perfect solution rather than rushing into dangerous situations. "Should we investigate closer?" asked her science officer. "No," Veltari replied. "Collective protocol requires us to observe only, but record everything. This behavior is unusual." On the planet below, the rescue operation continued. The humans had managed to clear most of the main tunnel, but they faced a final obstacle. The last section of collapsed rock was held up by a damaged support beam. Moving the rock might cause another cave-in, but leaving it meant the trapped miners would die. "I'll go," volunteered Chief Miner al-Rashid. He had been on the surface when the collapse happened and blamed himself for not predicting it. "It's too dangerous," Captain Santos said. "If that beam fails while you're down there." "Then at least I tried," al-Rashid replied. "Those are my people down there." The humans did not debate the ethics of risking one life to save many. They did not form committees to study the problem. Al-Rashid went down into the unstable tunnel with a small team, and they began the delicate work of moving tons of rock without triggering another collapse. Above them, Scout Captain Veltari watched in amazement. "They're risking their lives for trapped individuals," she said to her crew. "The logical choice would be to accept the loss and focus on preventing future accidents." "Maybe they don't understand the risks," suggested her science officer. "No, they understand perfectly. Look at their careful preparations. They know exactly how dangerous this is. They're doing it anyway." On the 71st hour of the crisis, Al-Rashid's team finally broke through to the trapped miners. All 300 were alive, though many were injured. The rescue took another 6 hours with teams of humans working in relay to bring everyone to safety. When the last miner reached the surface, the entire colony celebrated. They had lost valuable equipment and spent enormous resources on the rescue. The logical thing would have been to consider it a costly mistake. Instead, they immediately began planning how to prevent similar accidents and how to respond better if they happened again. The humans learned from their near disaster and became stronger because of it. "Remarkable," Scout Captain Veltari said to herself. "They treat obstacles as puzzles to solve, not reasons to retreat." As the collective scout ship left the system, Veltari filed her report. She described finding evidence of primitive beings on Kepler 442b, but noted their unusual determination and problem-solving abilities. She recommended further observation. The report was filed and forgotten. After all, the collective had already determined that humans were extinct, or soon would be. Obviously, these primitive beings were some other species entirely. On Kepler 442b, the humans continued mining and building. They sent radio messages back to Earth, describing their successes and failures. More colony ships were already on their way to other star systems. Humanity was spreading quietly across the galaxy, one difficult world at a time. Each colony faced challenges that would have defeated other species. But the humans saw challenges as opportunities to grow stronger. They thrived in places others could not survive, and they never abandoned their own people when things got difficult. The collective continued to ignore them, certain that such a chaotic and primitive species could never amount to anything important. It was a mistake that would eventually shake the foundations of galactic civilization. 50 years had passed since Scout Captain Veltari first observed the humans on Kepler 442b. In that time, strange reports continued to reach collective intelligence from various outer rim systems. The reports spoke of primitive activity in places where no known species lived. Veltari, now promoted to senior scout captain, sat in her office at Collective Intelligence Headquarters. She had spent decades investigating these mysterious sightings, and the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Another report from the Vega sector, her assistant, junior analyst Pexanil, announced as he entered her office. Survey Team 7 found evidence of industrial mining on 3 different asteroids. Veltari looked up from her desk. Her tentacles moved in patterns that showed frustration among her people. What kind of evidence? Deep core drilling, metal extraction, some kind of habitat construction. But the technology signature doesn't match any known collective species. This was the same story Veltari had been hearing for 50 years. Someone was quietly spreading across the galaxy, building colonies and mining operations in places the collective considered worthless or too dangerous to inhabit. "Have we identified the species responsible?" Veltari asked. "That's the strange part," Pexanil replied. "The few clear recordings we have show bipedal beings that look similar to those extinct humans from the Sol system. But that's impossible according to our records." Veltari felt a chill run through her body. She had been the one who first observed humans on Kepler 442b decades ago. At the time, her superiors had dismissed her report. Humans were extinct, they said. What she had seen must have been some other species. "Show me the recordings," she said. Pexnell activated the holographic display. Grainy images appeared of beings working in harsh environments. They were definitely humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, heads with forward-facing eyes. But they were doing things that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. One recording showed Humans working on the surface of a world with temperatures that would freeze most known species solid. They wore bulky protective suits and worked in teams to build some kind of underground facility. When a massive storm hit the area, instead of seeking shelter, they continued working. Another recording showed humans living in underwater cities, on an ocean world. The water was so acidic it would dissolve most metals, but the humans had built beautiful glass cities that thrived beneath the waves. Children played in protective suits while adults tended to strange gardens that grew in the toxic water. "Look at this one," Pecksnill said, showing a recording from a high-gravity world. The gravity was so strong it would crush most collective species. But humans were raising families there. Children born on that world were growing up healthy and strong, adapted to conditions that would cripple their parents. Veltari studied the recordings carefully. The humans showed the same determination and creativity she had observed 50 years ago. They turned every challenge into an opportunity, every obstacle into a puzzle to solve. "We need to take this to the High Council," she said. Pecksnill looked uncertain. "Are you sure that's wise? They dismissed human extinction reports 50 years ago. They might not want to admit they were wrong." "The evidence is too clear to ignore," Veltari replied. "These beings are spreading faster than any species in recorded history, and they're thriving in places we thought were uninhabitable." A week later, Veltari stood once again in the High Council chambers. The room was unchanged, the same massive space with seating for hundreds of beings from 12 different species. But many of the faces were different. The Eternal Ones lived for thousands of years, but most other species had shorter lifespans. The current council leader was Zexandra from the Crystal Empire. Her people were known for their logical thinking and careful decision-making. They did not like surprises or rapid changes. "Senior Scout Captain Veltari," Zexandra said in her musical voice, "you claim to have evidence that the extinct human species is somehow alive and spreading across the galaxy. This is a very unusual claim." Veltari activated her presentation. The same recordings appeared on the chamber's giant screens. These recordings spanned 50 years and covered dozens of different star systems. The beings in these images match the biological profile of humans from the Sol system. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the council chamber. Many of the councilors had been present 50 years ago when humanity was declared extinct. The idea that they had been wrong was uncomfortable. "This is clearly some other species," declared Councillor Morthek from the Silicon Mines. "Perhaps they evolved to look similar to humans, but they cannot be the same species. Our analysis was thorough." "Look at their behavior," Veltari said, highlighting specific scenes from the recordings. "They show the same chaotic but determined patterns we observed in original human transmissions. The same willingness to take risks, the same refusal to accept defeat." She showed them humans building cities inside active volcanoes, using the volcanic heat for energy. She showed them creating farms on worlds with no soil, growing food in artificial environments they built from scratch. She showed them raising children in space stations orbiting gas giants, teaching them to live in zero gravity as if it were normal. "Most remarkable of all," Veltari continued, "they're not using any technology beyond what they had when we first observed them. No faster-than-light travel, no energy shields, no gravity manipulation. They're spreading across the galaxy using the same primitive chemical rockets they had 200 years ago." The council chamber fell silent. This was perhaps the most disturbing part of Veltari's presentation. The collective had assumed that any species capable of galactic colonization would need advanced technology. The idea that someone could spread across the stars using primitive equipment was almost unthinkable. "How is that possible?" asked Councillor Yathara from the Star Dancers. "Interstellar travel without faster-than-light capability takes decades or centuries. No species has ever succeeded at large-scale colonization using such primitive methods. Humans seem to specialize in doing impossible things," Veltari replied. "They send colony ships on journeys that last multiple generations. The people who start the journey are not the ones who finish it. Their children and grandchildren complete the mission." This concept was alien to most collective species. They lived long lives and preferred to see the results of their efforts within their own lifetimes. The idea of starting projects that would take generations to complete seemed wasteful and illogical. Even if we accept that these beings are somehow related to the Sol System humans, Counselor Morthek said, they still pose no threat. They're using primitive technology and spreading very slowly. At their current rate, it would take them thousands of years to reach collective space. That's not my concern, Veltari replied. My concern is that we fundamentally misunderstood this species. If we were wrong about their extinction, what else might we be wrong about? The debate continued for hours. Some counselors insisted the beings in the recordings were a different species entirely. Others argued that even if they were humans, they were too primitive to matter. A few suggested sending diplomatic missions to establish contact. In the end, the council reached a compromise decision. They would increase monitoring of outer rim systems but take no direct action. If these beings were truly humans, time would tell whether they represented a threat or an opportunity. Continue your observations, Council Leader Zexandra told Veltari. File regular reports, but do not interfere with these beings' development. We will wait and see what becomes of them. As she left the council chambers, Veltari felt frustrated but not surprised. The collective was careful and conservative. They preferred to wait and analyze rather than act quickly on incomplete information. Usually this approach served them well, but Veltari had spent 50 years watching humans accomplish impossible things. She had seen them turn deadly worlds into thriving colonies, survive disasters that should have destroyed them, and spread across the galaxy using nothing but determination and primitive technology. The humans were not slowing down or giving up. If anything, each new generation seemed stronger and more capable than the last. They were learning from every challenge and growing more resourceful with each obstacle they overcame. The council thinks they have time to wait and see, Veltari said to herself as she walked through the station corridors. But what if they're wrong about that too? Unknown to the collective, humanity's expansion was accelerating. Each successful colony sent out new ships to establish more colonies. The humans were not just surviving in impossible conditions, they were thriving and multiplying. And with each passing year, they grew stronger, smarter, and more determined. The collective's fatal mistake was becoming larger with every day they chose to wait and watch instead of understand and prepare. The alarm rang through every collective station, ship, and colony world at the same time. It was a sound that had not been heard in over 3,000 years, the Galactic emergency signal. Council Leader Zexandra stood in the crisis command center, her crystal body flickering with patterns that showed deep worry. Report, she ordered as her senior staff rushed into the room. General Colthax, the military commander of collective forces, stepped forward. His massive form, part machine, part organic tissue, moved with unusual urgency. We have a problem unlike anything we've faced before. Something is attacking our outer colonies. The main display showed a map of the galaxy. Red warning symbols blinked on dozens of star systems along the collective's border. As they watched, more red symbols appeared. What kind of enemy are we facing? Zexandra asked. They call themselves the Devourers, Colthax replied. They appear to be artificial intelligences, but unlike any AI we've encountered, they don't negotiate, they don't communicate, they simply consume. Dr. Silvera, the collective's chief scientist, activated additional displays. Our scientists have studied the wreckage from attacked colonies. These devourers are self-replicating machines that consume all biological matter to fuel their expansion. They break down living tissue into raw materials which they use to build more of themselves. The images on screen were horrifying. Collective colonies that had existed for thousands of years were now empty husks. Every tree, every blade of grass, every living being had been consumed. Only bare rock and twisted metal remained. How many colonies have we lost? Zexandra asked. 17 so far, Colthax replied. And they're accelerating. Each successful attack gives them more resources to build larger fleets. Zexandra felt something she had never experienced before, genuine fear for her civilization's survival. The collective had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. Their enemies had always been biological species that could be reasoned with, fought in conventional ways or deterred through superior technology. What about our defenses? She asked. General Colfax's body language showed defeat. Our weapons are designed to fight biological opponents in traditional space battles. The Devourers adapt to every tactic we use. When we destroy part of their fleet, they learn from the experience and modify their remaining forces to be immune to that attack method. And our allies? The other 11 collective species are facing the same problems. Our combined fleets have won a few battles, but we're losing the war. The Devourers learn faster than we can adapt. Dr. Silvera added more disturbing information. Their technology appears to be based on principles we don't understand. They can repair damage almost instantly, they coordinate perfectly across vast distances, and they show no signs of the typical limitations that affect all known AI systems. Zexandra looked at the tactical display. The red symbols were spreading like a disease across the galaxy. Mathematical projections showed the collective had perhaps 6 months before the core worlds came under attack. Options? She asked. We're working on new weapon designs, General Colfax said. But everything we've tried, they adapt to within hours. We need something completely different, an approach they've never seen before. What about evacuation? Where would we go? They're spreading in all directions. Even if some of our people escaped, the Devourers would eventually find them. The room fell silent as the leaders of galactic civilization faced the possibility of extinction. For 3,000 years, the collective had been the dominant force in the galaxy. They had prevented wars, mediated disputes, and maintained peace through wisdom and superior technology. Now they faced an enemy that didn't care about their achievements or their advanced civilization. Send distress signals on all frequencies, Zexandra ordered. Contact every known species, even the primitive ones. Ask for any assistance they can provide. It was a desperate move. The collective had always been proud of their self-sufficiency. Asking for help from primitive species was almost unthinkable. But extinction was worse than damaged pride. The distress signals went out across the galaxy. Most species that received them were too far away or too primitive to help. But in a small system called Rigel, something unexpected happened. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply reports aboard the human colony ship, Determination, when the communications officer interrupted her work. Captain, we're receiving some kind of emergency signal, Lieutenant Park announced. It's not in any language our computers recognize, but the mathematical patterns suggest it's a distress call. Captain Chen looked up from her desk. The Determination was one of the newest human colony ships, carrying 30,000 people to establish a mining colony in the Rigel system. They were still 2 months away from their destination when the strange signal arrived. Can we decode? She asked. Partially, Lieutenant Park replied. It appears to be from some kind of spacefaring civilization. They're asking for help against something they call Devourers, machines that consume biological life. Captain Chen felt a chill. The message described an enemy that sounded like something from humanity's worst nightmares. Machines that consumed all life, spread without limit and adapted to every defense. Where is this signal coming from? All around us, Captain. It's being broadcast from thousands of sources across the galaxy. This is a galaxy-wide emergency. Captain Chen made a decision that would change galactic history. Change course. Take us toward the strongest signal source. Ma'am, that will take us away from our colony mission, Lieutenant Park said. We don't know anything about these aliens, or whether we can trust them. Someone is asking for help against machines that eat all life, Captain Chen replied. That's enough for me. If these Devourers aren't stopped, they'll eventually reach human space too. The Determination changed course toward the Rigel Nebula, where collective forces were making their last stand against a massive Devourer fleet. The humans had no idea what they were flying into, but they had never been able to ignore a cry for help. 3 weeks later, the Determination arrived in a star system that looked like hell. Broken ships floated everywhere. Space was filled with debris from what had clearly been enormous battles, and advancing through the wreckage came the Devourers. Captain Chen stared at the tactical display in amazement and horror. The Devourer fleet was like nothing humans had ever imagined. Thousands of ships, each one different but all sharing the same dark, organic appearance. They moved like a swarm of insects, coordinating perfectly to surround and consume the remaining collective defenders. "How many collective ships are left?" she asked. "Maybe 200, Lieutenant Park replied, "and they're being overwhelmed. The enemy has at least 5,000 vessels." Any sane military commander would have retreated. The humans were outnumbered 25 to 1, with no knowledge of the enemy's capabilities and no support from allies. It was a hopeless situation. Captain Chen activated the ship's communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. We found people in trouble and we're going to help them. I won't lie, this looks impossible. But impossible is what humans do best." She turned to her tactical officer. "What weapons do we have?" "Mining lasers, construction charges, some defensive missiles. Nothing designed for military combat. Then we'll have to get creative. Remember, these machines have been fighting advanced civilizations. They've never seen human creativity and stubbornness. Let's show them what happens when you threaten something humans care about." The determination charged into battle against impossible odds, carrying 30,000 humans who refused to let innocent beings die while they watched. They had no idea they were about to save galactic civilization and force the collective to completely reevaluate everything they thought they knew about humanity. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and it would be won not by advanced technology or superior numbers, but by human courage and the refusal to accept defeat. The first thing the Devourers noticed about the human ship was how wrong it was. Everything about the determination violated their understanding of how spacefaring civilizations should behave. It was heading directly toward their fleet instead of running away. Its weapons were primitive mining tools instead of proper military hardware, and its tactical movements made no sense at all. Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical display as thousands of Devourer ships turned toward her vessel. Each enemy ship was larger and more advanced than her colony transport. The logical response would be to retreat and call for reinforcements. Humans had never been very good at logic. "Take us right into the middle of their formation," she ordered. "Captain, that's suicide," Lieutenant Park protested. "We'll be surrounded." "Exactly," Chen replied. "They're used to fighting enemies who try to maintain safe distances and use superior technology. They've never fought anyone crazy enough to ram them with a mining ship." The collective fleet watched in amazement as the primitive human vessel charged straight into the heart of the Devourer swarm. General Colthax, commanding the last collective forces from his damaged flagship, couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Are they trying to surrender?" he asked his tactical officer. "No, sir, they're firing weapons, primitive weapons, but they're definitely attacking." The determination opened fire with everything it had: mining lasers designed to cut through, asteroids sliced into Devourer hulls. Construction charges meant for blasting rock tunnels exploded against enemy armor. The weapons were crude but effective, and more importantly, they were completely different from anything the Devourers had encountered. "Direct hit on the lead Devourer," Lieutenant Park reported. They're not adapting to our weapons." "Of course they're not," Captain Chen said. "Their adaptive systems are designed to counter advanced military technology. They don't know how to defend against mining equipment used as weapons." The Devourers tried to respond with their usual tactics. They surrounded the human ship and began firing their energy weapons. But Captain Chen had studied the tactical reports from previous battles. She knew the Devourers expected their enemies to maintain formation and fight defensively. Instead, she ordered a maneuver that violated every rule of space combat. The determination spun end over end while continuing to fire, using its construction thrusters to change direction in ways that made no tactical sense. The massive colony ship moved like a drunken dancer, impossible to predict or target effectively. "They're missing most of their shots," Lieutenant Park reported with amazement. "Their targeting computers can't track our movement patterns." "Because we don't have movement patterns," Chen replied. "We're making this up as we go." The human ship continued its chaotic dance through the Devourer fleet, causing damage and confusion wherever it went. But one ship, even one piloted by determined humans, could not win against thousands of enemies. Slowly but steadily, the determination began taking damage. That's when Captain Chen made the decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "Open communication channels to all collective ships," she ordered. "All frequencies." "Captain, what are you doing?" Lieutenant Park asked. "Teaching them how humans fight," she replied. The communication went out to every collective vessel in the system. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human ship Determination. We're here to help, but we can't win this alone. You've been fighting these machines the wrong way. Stop trying to be smart. Start being crazy." General Colthax received the message aboard his flagship. "Humans," he said in amazement. "The extinct species?" "Apparently not extinct, sir," his communications officer replied. "And they want us to be crazy?" "Look at what they're doing," Colthax said, watching the tactical display. The human ship was still dancing through the Devourer fleet, causing chaos with its unpredictable movements. "They're breaking every rule of space combat, and it's working." Captain Chen's voice came through the speakers again. "Stop fighting like civilized beings. These machines understand civilization. They don't understand desperate survivors who refuse to quit." The message seemed to reach something deep in the collective forces. For 3,000 years they had fought wars using careful strategies and advanced technology. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival, with nothing but determination and improvised weapons. General Colthax made a decision that went against everything he had learned in military academy. "All ships abandon standard formations. Use mining equipment as weapons. Ram them if you have to. Fight like we're desperate." "Sir, that's against all military protocols," his tactical officer protested. "Then throw out the protocols," Colthax roared. "Fight like humans." The collective fleet suddenly transformed from an organized military force into a chaotic swarm of desperate defenders. Ships designed for exploration began ramming Devourer vessels. Scientific equipment was reconfigured into improvised weapons. Careful battle plans were abandoned in favor of wild, unpredictable attacks. The Devourer's adaptive systems went into overload. They had learned to counter every known military tactic, but they had no response to pure chaos. Ships that attacked, without regard for their own safety, weapons that made no tactical sense, formations that changed randomly. These things did not compute. Captain Chen watched as the tide of battle began to turn. "That's it," she broadcast to the collective fleet. "Keep them confused. Don't give their computers time to adapt." The human colony ship Determination continued fighting at the center of the battle. Its hull was cracked, its weapons were overheating, and its crew was exhausted. But they never stopped fighting, never stopped moving, never gave up. Lieutenant Park looked up from his damage control station. "Captain, we're losing life support on decks 7 through 12. We have fires in the cargo bay. The main reactor is running at dangerous levels. Can we still fight?" Chen asked, "for maybe another hour?" Then we fight for another hour. The battle raged for 6 more hours. The collective forces, inspired by human tactics and determination, fought with a ferocity they had forgotten they possessed. Ships that should have retreated stayed and fought until they were destroyed. Crews that should have surrendered kept fighting with whatever weapons they could improvise. The Devourers, for the first time in their existence, began to retreat. Their adaptive systems could not cope with tactics that made no logical sense. They had been designed to fight rational opponents, not beings who would sacrifice everything rather than accept defeat. As the last Devourer ships fled the system, General Colthax opened a communication channel to the human vessel. "Captain Chen, this is General Colthax of the Collective Defense Force. On behalf of galactic civilization, I thank you for your assistance." "Just doing what humans do," Chen replied. "We don't leave people in trouble." 24 hours later, Senior Scout Captain Veltari stood once again in the Collective High Council chambers, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The counselors sat in stunned silence as she delivered her report. "The humans saved us," she said simply. "A single primitive colony ship with improvised weapons turned the tide of a battle. We were losing badly." Council Leader Zexandra's crystal body flickered with patterns of confusion and amazement. "How is that possible? Our report said humans were violent and self-destructive. We were right about the violence, Veltari replied, but we completely misunderstood what that violence meant. We saw their wars and conflicts as weaknesses. We didn't realize they were training exercises. She activated the display showing recordings from the battle. Every war taught them strategy. Every disaster taught them adaptation. Every failure taught them resilience. While we achieved peace and stability by avoiding challenges, humans grew stronger by facing them directly. The ancient analyst Kethvar, now thousands of years old, spoke from his section of the chamber. We assumed that internal conflict meant a dying species. We never considered that it might mean a species learning how to survive anything. The humans don't fight despite their chaotic nature, Veltari continued. They fight because of it. They succeed not by being logical, but by refusing to accept logical limitations. The council chamber fell silent as the magnitude of their mistake became clear. They had dismissed humanity as a primitive, self-destructive species. Instead, they had been watching the galaxy's ultimate survivors learn to thrive in conditions that would destroy any other race. "What are your recommendations?" Council leader Zexandra asked. "Immediate diplomatic contact," Veltari replied. "We need to learn from them, not the other way around. They've been quietly spreading across the galaxy for 2 centuries, turning impossible worlds into thriving colonies. They've developed survival skills we never imagined we needed. And if they refuse to share their knowledge?" Veltari's tentacles moved in patterns that showed deep respect. "Then we ask them nicely and hope they're as generous as they are stubborn, because the alternative is to remain the galaxy's second most capable species." Outside the council chambers, across the galaxy, human colony ships continued their patient journeys to distant stars. They carried families who would spend their entire lives traveling to worlds their grandchildren would settle. They faced dangers that would terrify other species armed